In this video, we're going to go over on how you can make animations with AI using Deforum to make something like this. Before we get started, I'd like to remind you to please like and subscribe so that way I can continue to make these videos. And as we get into this, I'm going to be doing the Google Collab version of this first and then the automatic 1111, just so I cover both bases. The Google Collab version is an easier one for people who don't have like a very strong graphics card in their computer or don't want to try to run something like RunPod, and you can just run it off of your own kind of Google Drive. And then the automatic 1111 are for those who are kind of more invested into AI and have more of a workhorse of a computer in order to do this. So let's get started with the Google Collab version first. All right, so we are in the Google Collab version with Stable Diffusion. This is Deforum. And if you want to get a copy of this yourself, be sure to check the description below and I'll leave the link there. Once you have that, make sure to go to File, Save a Copy in Drive. Just so you always have access to your own. Then what you're going to do is, I'm just going to kind of walk you through it and how it all works. And so first we're going to click on play button. Yes, it's okay. We're going to run anyway. And then that's going to go through and we'll wait for that to get done. Perfect. And then we're going to set up the environment. And as you can see, that did take a little while. It took up to 43 seconds. So just have some patience. Now we have the path setup. So the path setup, you don't really have to worry about any of these things. When you click it, it's going to ask you to connect to your Google Drive, which is fine. But the most important thing here is if you have a model checkpoint that you want to change. So we have a lot of different options here, which is great. I'm going to just stick with ProtoGen because it's fine. It really kind of depends on what you want to play with. And then you have your custom config path and checkpoint path. So basically, it's if you want to use your own custom model for this, you would just, once you've connected to Google Drive, you can put in the path here, and that's where it would go. The path would look similar to something like this, and that's how you would, it might be like slash, and then it would be like model name, like in type .ckpt, for example. And that would go into the custom checkpoint path if you wanted to use one. So I'm going to go ahead and click play here. I'm going to connect to the Google Drive. Very normal. And that might also take a moment because it's also going to be creating these folders if you don't already have them. So that's why you'd be like, I don't have these connected. It's fine. It makes them for you. And so I'm just going to let that keep on going. You can see it's going to take a little bit to load up this model, which is totally fine. And then I'm going to kind of explain what we do in the animation part here. So when you start, it will be on none. And then we have 2D and we have 3D. Those are the things we're going to be focusing on mostly here. So I'm just going to do 2D for now. And we'll keep it at 100 frames. This was at 1,000. But I'm going to keep it at 100 just as an example here. Border replicate is totally fine. And now we get into the motion parameters. A lot of this stuff, this is what I use mainly, is just through here, everything down here, I'd never touch. And I don't think we should get into for this video anyway. So angle, how that's going to work is if I say at frame 0, if I give a positive number, it's going to make it rotate like this. And if I give a negative number, it's going to make it rotate like this. So positive to the right, negative to the left. Now, if we use zoom, zoom is always where zoom lives. If you don't want it to move at all, it has to be at a 1. Don't ask me why, I don't know. If you want it to zoom in, you're You're going to use like a positive number. If you wanted to zoom out, you're going to use a negative number. And these are all the basic stuff that's in here by default. So they're giving you an example here of what you can use with math and how that's going to affect it. And it's just going to be using sine wave. So if, you know, we use translation X, for example, it might, if we're going to positive, so positive is going to go to the right, negative is going to go to the left. It might go to the right, like really quickly, and then slow down, and then really quickly again. Something like that. I might not have done it correctly with my hand movements, but you kind of get the idea. So again, with this, if I wanted to go to the right, positive, left, negative, don't want it to move at all, 0. Translation Y, if I wanted to go up, positive, if I wanted to go down, negative. And that is what 2D deals with. Now we're going to get into 3D. In 3D, make sure you have that change there. Translation Z, that is going to be your zoom motion, okay? So with 10, it's going to go in, and then with a negative 10, it would go out. I do find that with 3D, the translation Z is better, because with zoom, sometimes you might get like these weird effects on the side that I don't really like. So I recommend using translation Z in 3D mode. Now keep in mind, even though you are in 3D mode, the stuff in 2D mode can affect 3D mode, so just keep that in mind. And I don't think it applies vice versa, but just keep that in mind. Rotation 3DX, so this is similar to translation X, but it's not the same. So if translation X goes like this, 3DX goes like this, because it's like you're turning your head to go a certain direction. So positive to the right, negative to the left. And then with 3DY, it's going to be like I'm looking up, positive, looking up, and then negative will be looking down. And then rotation Z is similar to, rotation 3DZ is similar to angle, where depending on if it's positive here, I'm going to go to the right, negative is going to go to the left. Okay, so those are all the things that you kind of need to know for that. For the video that I showed in the example of the women's fashion over 100 years, I didn't use any of these. Okay, I just kept it as static as possible. Now, there are some cases where we might change this, and I'll show you what those cases are. So the rest of this stuff, I don't generally touch, so don't worry about it. It's complicated anyway. Video input, that is another option that we can do. This is generally for if you're trying to do like video to video, you're trying to put a certain kind of effect onto it. I don't touch it a lot within the Google Collab or in Automatic 1111. So a lot of the stuff I don't touch. Now, before we get a little further into it, say we start a animation and we like how it's going, and I don't want to have to start that animation again. So what you'll do is you have this resume animation function, and in the files that are going to end up being populated in your Google Drive, they're all going to have a time string attached to them and then like a number. So it might be, you know, underscore is 001. You know, cool, that was frame 1, but the time string is 2022, all these numbers. So if you click resume time string and you delete, say you liked frames 1 through 50, but you didn't like 51 through 100, you can delete 51 through 100 and it will start again from 50. So it's going to save you a lot of time instead of having to start over again. It's totally worth it. I didn't do that for the longest time, and I wasted a lot of time doing that. So we're the prompts now, okay? So these are prompts if you do not do any animation, okay? So that is, if you have it set to none, that's when you would use these prompts. It's only going to be making images. But because we're doing animation, we're going to put it to 2D, and we're going to deal with animation prompts. So I'm going to show you guys an example of, let me find where I have animations for the women's fashion stuff, and I will kind of show you what all goes into that because it's more complicated, but not at the same time than you might think it is. So I'm going to go ahead and grab the settings file here. All right, so I have taken prompts that I did from the 100 Years of Fashion of Women's Fashion video, and I put it into here, and these are pretty much verbatim. I cut some things out just to keep it an even 100, but this is what I used when I was using the realistic vision model. I know we're not using that for this, but this is just an example. So now it's important to note here, I have 0 through 100, okay? Now at frame 100, that's when it would start, but our max frames, what I said before, was at 100. So I need to make sure that I scroll back up and change this to 110 like I have here. Was this, now I'm gonna make it this. So that way we at least get 10 frames of this last 2010 women's fashion. Now, what you might see in some of these things in here is we like high detailed skin, 1.2. This is what's called a weight. And a weight you're basically giving it more, saying this is more important than some other things, so make sure to do more of this. You can do weights that way, or you can kind of do it more indiscriminately. So if I wanted it to make sure that it was 2010 or 1910 women's fashion, like I can do a double parentheses in here, and that might make it, that's going to say, hey, I want to emphasize this more. And I just do double parentheses normally. You can do quadruple or whatever you want to say accent this more. Just be aware that if you do something like, for example, a red leather jacket, which I did before in a different video, it started to make everything just into red leather jackets, and it was no longer the person, and it got a little wild. So make sure to pay attention to that, and if you haven't already, make sure to click play on the animation section here, and you'll see a green check mark. And once we have our prompts done, and we're good to go, again, we can go ahead and click play here. I believe, at least in Automatic 1111, you don't want to put a comma at the end here, otherwise it will mess it up, so pay attention to that. Because otherwise it's going to be expecting another frame and you're not giving it one. Now we have our image settings, we have our width and our height. It's good to just test things at 512 by 512, that is what all AI is trained on, is square images. And 512 by 512 is what we started with, so just keep it at that. Our seed is basically, it's kind of like a randomizer, it's the best way I can describe it, where -1 is going to say, hey, I'm just going to choose whatever seed we want, we're going to play with that. If I wanted to start with 100, and I say I run this once, right, and I don't change anything, and then I run it again, and I keep this same seed and I don't change anything, it's going to give me the exact same output. Okay, so that's something really useful if you're trying to reproduce something. If you use the same seed and you haven't changed anything, then that's going to get you back that same output. Versus a -1 will always be random. So if you like your parameters and your settings, but you're like, just doesn't work for me, you try again with the randomizer and see what you get. If you change anything, if say I had that seed 100 again, you change anything, like the height, width, whatever, it's going to change your output. It doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. It will always change it. If you change one thing, it's going to change everything else. Our sampler, we have a bunch of different ones. I always like to use Euler Ancestral. That just one works really well for me, so we just keep with that. Steps, these can vary. Generally, I will never go below 20. Generally, and I will never go above 50, just because I don't see much of a change after 50. And anything below 20 is not the quality that I really like. Steps is basically how long the AI is going to take on creating each frame to make it just better quality. But which of course means it will take you a longer time to do something. So for this example, let's keep it at 20. And then scale is basically how much the AI is going to rely on the prompt you've given it. 7 is pretty average. I never go above 12. The higher you go, the more contrast that you will get. Past 12, you start getting a lot of contrast generally. And then if you go below that, then AI is going to just kind of be more free-forming, creative with what it wants to make. And it might not conform to your prompts very well. You can keep the rest of this stuff. We have prompt weighting in here, so we know that those other prompts that we mentioned that had like the 1.2 will work. And then we have our batch settings. So we're just going to do one batch. This is like, say I had 100 frames. Cool, I want you to run this 5 times. It's going to do it 5 times for me, so we would do 5 batches if we wanted that. The batch name, standard is stable font. We could just do, Wins fashion. And that's what we'll get. See behavior, just keep it as iteration. Everything else in here, we can keep the same. We're not using an initial image. This is, say we wanted to start with someone from a picture we found on the internet, from 1910, and I wanted to be really close to that, then I would start at 0.8. And it's gonna slowly variate from that. But if I don't want it to change, or if I want it to change a lot, I keep it at 0.1 or something like that. And then you just make sure that you want to link that image. I use Imgur a lot, and you just copy and paste that link. And you can use maths. I rarely ever do though. And if you do use this, make sure to click the Use Init checkbox. After that, I don't really touch much. So what we're going to do now is we have that. As soon as we click play here, it's going to start to make our image. And if we scroll down, you can see right here, it's going to start the process. And we will see how it takes this. Again, we're using Protogen, so I don't know how this is going to look, how it's going to work. Okay, I mean, that's not bad. It's looks, pretty old-timey, looks pretty good. So we're going to let this go, and I'll come back when it's finished. All right, so we have finished our video, and then down here is where you can make the video for you from the frames that you just made. And it should already be good to go. If this is clicked, make sure to click that off. And we're just going to go ahead and click play here. And that is not what I want. I want to make sure I obviously unclick skip video, run for all. I'm going to click play. And then it's going to make a video for me. And so now we have our video here of those prompts. Now, it's really kind of hard to tell what decades that a lot of these are from, because we went pretty fast through it. That is something that is important. So because we only did 10 frames for each decade, it didn't give the AI enough time to transition from one to the other. So if instead of 10 we say we did 50 frames, that's going to give the AI a better chance of transitioning between each one. So that's the basic idea of how you make a fashion video. You can see it kind of got blurred here at the end, and that the faces aren't super great. That is because the AI is dealing with pixels that are further away from the frame than if it was closer. Like if we just did the whole face, just filled up this frame, it would do a lot better getting those details because it has more pixels to work with. So the further away something is, the less accurate it's going to be. Now we're going to get into a little bit on just kind of showing you animation and how this stuff kind of works. So I'm going to run the same kind of idea, but we're going to, if I say, let's do, we're going to do translation X this way, we're going to make it zoom in here. We'll do 1.5. 2 might be a lot. We'll throw in an angle just because we can, just to kind of give you an idea. So we'll be moving here. We're going to be rotating this direction and zooming in. That should be more than enough, so you guys can kind of see how that will affect the whole thing. And as soon as you've changed anything, right, you need to click play again in order to save that change. Otherwise it won't work. You don't have to click play on everything else again, if I remember correctly. And we are just going to click play on load settings again, and it should start it for us. We'll scroll back down, and it's going to go again here. And we'll see how it turns out. So let's see the video that we got from that. It kind of works. It looks absolutely ridiculous, and we don't see a lot of what's going on. So using something like this doesn't work super well. It was kind of cool when it zoomed in like that though. So I'll give you an example of, so we'll count that as the zoom example. And then we'll get into, say, a translation one and a rotation angle one. So we'll start with the translation X. We'll do X, Y, and angle. Okay, so we're back, and I just went ahead and did individual videos for angle, zoom, translation X, and translation Y, just so you can kind of see what those look like and what will affect them. And then I also did a video on where if you want to, say, do a combination of those things, we have translation X and translation Y here. And I say, cool, at frame 0, I want X to start moving, at a speed of 1. and then I say at 49 I still want it to be 1, and then at 50 I want it to be 0. The reason that you have to do this is if you take the 49 out of here, you just leave it at this, it will be a slow, it will just be a slow change to 0. Versus if I want it to go and then stop and then change, then you're going to have to keep that 49 in there. And the same with the Y here. And so in the video you see on the screen now, you can see how that worked, where it went one direction, stopped, and then went up to another direction. Now, if you want it to be more of a, if you want 2 to be, X and Y at the same time, to go at a diagonal, you can do that. And so you can really play a lot with these functions. And now I'm going to get into the 3D so you can see what those look like. And in 3D mode, you can see some examples of how that will affect the video here. Now, I used 1, like the number 1 for all of these. So that's pretty consistent, so you can see what you use. If you use something smaller like 0.2 or 0.3 or something like that, then you're going to get a different effect and it won't affect it as much. I'll use it for videos like this where I wanted to create a kind of S motion. So I'm using X and Y together to kind of like pull at each other, I think is what I imagine in my mind, to allow it to create. And I used smaller numbers and increments to like do 0.1 at, frame 50, 0.2 at frame 51, 0.3 frame 52, and etc. in order to create those kind of curves. So it's important to note that on your Google Drive, we're going to go to it right now. You can see that I have this AI folder here, and I'm going to click on this, and then I'm going to click on Stable Diffusion 2023-04 Women's Fashion. And this is where everything is saved. All the frames that you just created are saved here. And if you want to get that video that is at the end, if you scroll down far enough, you'll find the video right here, as well as you have your settings that we used for this. So in case you ever want to redo something, you can do that. You can see this is the seed that was used. So say you liked what it made and you want to redo that again, you can grab this seed if you were using the random function. So, and you can find all of your prompts and everything in here. So it's super useful that we get these. And that about wraps it out for the Google Collab. The downsides again are you can't restore faces in this. So the faces might look a little wonky, and you can't do negative prompts. Hi, this is Future Russ. I said some things that were not true. And basically, if you want to put negative prompts in your animation prompt, all you're gonna have to do, you're gonna go dash dash and then neg, and then you can put in your negative prompts after this. So a lot of times you'll do like blurry, out of focus, like mutated hands, double heads, things like this that will help to kind of avoid the thing that you're going for. And then you're just gonna have to put that for every single one. So for this example, you just have to do it like that, and then as long as you end with the comment, you'll be good to go. So anyways, back to the video. But I think it's a good starting point for you to play with. And if I forgot anything, I'm going to throw it in right here. Don't remember what it is, but we're going to move on to the automatic 1111 section. And in 3D mode, you can see some examples of how that will affect the video here. Now, I used 1, like the number 1 for all of these. So that's pretty consistent, so you can see what you use. If you use something smaller like 0.2 or 0.3 or something like that, then you're going to get a different effect and it won't affect it as much. I'll use it for videos like this where I wanted to create a kind of S motion. So I'm using X and Y together to kind of like pull at each other, I think is what I imagine in my mind, to allow it to create. And I used smaller numbers and increments to like do 0.1 at frame 50, 0.2 at frame 51, 0.3 frame 52, and etc. in order to create those kind of curves. So it's important to note that on your Google Drive, we're going to go to it right now. You can see that I have this AI folder here, and I'm going to click on this, and then I'm going to click on Stable Diffusion 2023-04 Women's Fashion. And this is where everything is saved. All the frames that you just created are saved here. And if you want to get that video that is at the end, if you scroll down far enough, you'll find the video right here, as well as you have your settings that we used for this. So in case you ever want to redo something, you can do that. You can see this is the seed that was used. So say you liked what it made and you want to redo that again, you can grab this seed if you were using the random function. So, and you can find all of your prompts and everything in here. So it's super useful that we get these. And that about wraps it up for the Google Collab. The downsides again are you can't restore faces in this, so faces might look a little wonky, and you can't do negative prompts. But I think it's a good starting point for you to play with. And if I forgot anything, I'm going to throw it in right here. Don't remember what it is, but we're going to move on to the Automatic 1111 section. Alright, so we are in Automatic 1111. If you do not have this and you have a Windows computer, I will leave a little link at the top that will help you install it on your computer. I promise the installation is pretty easy. Now once you have that, this is completely up to you. I'm using Realistic Vision 2.0 here. And this is just for this example of doing the women's fashion video that you saw at the beginning. Now, in order to do this, you need to make sure that you have a deforum installed. In order to do that, with Automatic 1111, we can go to, so you can see I have it installed here. You're going to go to Available, and then you're just going to click on Load From, and then I find A to Z is easier. And then if you don't have it installed, it'll show up around here in the DE section. Then you can just click on the Install button, and you'll be good to go. And then once you've done that, all you're going to have to do is go to Reload Set UI here, and then that'll help it pop up over here. And if it doesn't, you can either shut down the program and start again, or you can use Deforum like this. And just in case you don't know, when you do install this, you will be starting it. This is what your Stable Diffusion folder will look like, and you started with this batch file right here. So let's get into it. We have Deforum here, all right? So for this video, I did 768 by height and width, and just as a precursor, Automatic 1111 gets updated, you know, fairly often, so this UI might look different, so just be aware of that, but the function will be the same. Now we have the height and width. With this, if you want your faces to look good, especially in a video, depending on the model that you are using, you might want to use Restore Faces. Sometimes the models come out great, sometimes they don't. This is an option. It will take a little longer, but it does a pretty good job. Now, we have here is that we have our keyframes. Now we have 2D and 3D. These are what I play with most of the time. I don't normally use interpolation or video input very often, so we're not going to worry about those. So we have 2D and 3D. I'm going to explain these. So when you have it, this is the standard setup, okay? So it has zoom, angle, transform, center X, transform, center Y, translation X, and translation Y. So I've never actually used these ones. These are new for me, but you can, we're going to talk at least about these ones right here. So I am going to remove these, because that is just a sine equation, okay? And it's going to do math to do stuff to make it kind of go in and out like this. Or it might go like this, but you know, it's a consistent motion, but we're not going to go for that today. And for zoom, 1 is standstill. If I put 2 in here, it will make it go zoom in, and if I put like a -2, it will make it zoom out. Angle, what's going to happen is it's going to rotate your canvas, so it's going to move like this, or it's going to move like that. And then transform says a X center axis for 2D. Angle zoom. I don't know what this does. We might find out. We're going to play with it. This is new for me. But I'm going to put it to 0 because I know that is what is normal for that stuff. And then we have translation X. If I put this to 1, it's going to move to the right. Left, it's going to move, or rather, -1 would make it move to the left. And translation Y, we are going to, this is going to make it move up, and then a negative would make it move down. So that's just kind of give you an idea of how all of that works. Don't worry too much about this stuff. I don't touch it very often, but it is some other things. But we're just going to go over some basics right now. CFG scale, if you're not already familiar with it, basically it's, you know, how close to the image should conform to the prompt. So lower values produce more creative results. It is, you know, you should be important to note that the higher this is as well, the more contrast that will be in the images that are being generated. So I never go above 12 generally, and I never go below 7. So, and this is just changing this is staying here. Our seed, so this is with seed behavior, don't worry about that stuff. We're not going to worry about most of this. We can keep this as Euler A, I rarely ever change it. Step schedule, most of this stuff I don't change, so don't worry about it. And then we have the noise, coherence, anti-blur. We're not going to really touch that, so it's all good. So we're going to go over, so that's kind of the idea here. We'll get into 3D in a moment, so I'm going to just go into prompt here. So prompt, this is where the magic, quote unquote, happens. So you can see here it's giving us an example of a prompt here. Now what I'm going to do is I am going to grab the settings file and grab what I did before for this run specifically. So I'm going to grab all of this, and it looks overwhelming. It looks like that's a lot of text and you don't know what to do, but I'm going to explain. It's okay. So what we have here is you always want to make sure you have the brackets and then the quotes around the number and then colon and then a quote around this entire prompt, and then it ends at a colon, or not a colon, a comma, excuse me. Now, the reason that we have things like raw photo, high detailed scan, 8K UHD, DSLR, soft lighting, high quality Fujifilm X-T3, is that the person who made the model realistic vision, that is what they recommended to use for prompts to help get the best output from their experience. So I wanted to use that for this. Now, all I did was raw photo, 1910 women's fashion, full body, high detailed skin, and kind of explain that now. As you kind of go through this, you're going to see that I went and added in more details for specific things. So you can see instead of just 1920 women's fashion, I said beading flapper's dress, right? So that's more what I'm trying to go for. Or 1930s house dress, hooverette, puff sleeved, colorful flowers and patterns, because I'm trying to be more specific to what I'm looking for here. Now, the other thing you might notice is you might see this dash dash neg, okay? This is a negative prompt, okay? Now, this is something that I use often because these are the things that we don't want. So I have this for every frame, or for every time that I change to a new prompt, because I don't want any of those things. So it just helps get it more into the direction of where I'm going. So we always start at 0, and then I went to 50. So we're going to do, 50 frames or so, 50 frames for 1910, and then 50 frames for 1920, and then 30, and then basically just through history, we got after we were done with Rule 2, fashion exploded a lot. So I was trying to add in more here to go along. So you can see it looks intimidating, but it's really not at the end of the day. And that is more or less how prompts work. You can use prompts positive and negative here, but I find that if there's certain things that I want, like maybe, for example, in one decade, I want them to wear sunglasses, and in another I don't. Well, I can't put sunglasses and then prompts negative here because I'm only wanting it negative sometimes. So that's why I always make a negative option here. And then just make sure at the very end, you don't have a comma at the end here, because it's going to expect one and you will get an error. So make sure that you don't put a comma here. As long as you end with that bracket, then you'll be good. You don't need to really worry about init or control net, hybrid video. Output, you can kind of mess with. I generally just keep it at 15 and it works fine. If you want to play more with it, then you might change that. And I generally will not upscale immediately. I will do that later after I'm done with my video, because the smaller the aspect ratio, the faster it can make it, and the less time and the more powerful graphics card you're going to need. So I generally won't do that until after I have a video I like, and then I'll upscale. The other important thing here that I didn't mention was your keyframes. Cadence is generally good at 2. It'll generate every other frame instead of every frame, and 2 generally works great. But as you can see, I have a max frames of 120 here, and the prompts 525. So what I'm really going to want here is that it's going to start doing the 2010 women's fashion at 525. So I can't end on 525. Say I want to do another 25 frames, so then I would end at 550. So we're going to make this 550 here, okay? And So after you've done all of that, because we haven't done anything with the fashion thing yet, then you can click run and we're going to see what it's going to do. So I'm going to click run here and hopefully it will work. The other thing we need to make sure that we do here is we need to name the folder it's going into. So right now it's a forum time string. We're just going to call this women's fashion YouTube. And our seed is going to be random. If you can change this to 100, right? And if you do that, then every time you run this, if you don't change any other parameter, it will give you the exact same output. But if you keep it at random, which is -1, then it will always give you a different output, even though all of the other parameters are the same. Now, if I change the height and width of this and it's still like seed 100, it's going to change what it looks like, no question. Same with the steps, same with the sampler. Sampler might be pretty similar, but it's going to change. So that's something to be aware of. So we're going to check back in once I've run this and we'll see and discuss kind of the issues that we've run into or not. Alright, so we're back. It took about 15 minutes to get done. This is using a 4090 graphics card. If you have one that is better than that, it will be faster. If you have one that's worse, it will take a little more time and that's okay. So, but what you'll see is on your computer, you're going to see this within your image to image folder in the Stable Diffusion dealio here. So you just go to outputs, image to images, and then we can go to like women's fashion YouTube because that's what we called it. And then you're going to see all the individual frames here, but it will also automatically make a video for you. So we can see how that got done. So I'd say overall this one actually came out better than the original one that I did, at least looking from this. I am using a different model though, so that may have something to do with it. Now at this point I might have restarted it because the feet were getting cut off and I don't necessarily like that. So I think it looks like it fixed it here eventually, but it might be something that I'm like, well, that might not be exactly what I'm looking for. We're changing now every 25 frames here. So overall, I would say that was pretty good. You can see that faces are kind of messed up though. So we might try restore faces if we're going to run this again. So overall, I would say it's pretty decent for a video. The longest thing with these videos is just doing the research and knowing what you want and what you don't want. So say for example, let me bring that back or something of that sort. So say I didn't like, after frame 250 or something. Let's see. The feet started to get cut off pretty early actually. So I might restart this whole thing. But let's say for example I didn't like that. I wanted to restart at 100. Okay. So I'm going to find 100 and then I'm going to delete all of these and get rid of them because I don't want these anymore anyway. This is why it's also important to start with a small file size because these don't take up that much space. But then what I want to do is I want to start over from this point again. Now I can't just click generate because it won't work that way. So what you'll do is I'm going to go to rename. I'm just going to do a Control-C here. And I'm going to resume animation. And I'm just going to do it from this time string. I'm going to click resume from time string. So that way, it's always going to start again from this point. So if I click generate, so see now it's starting to generate from that point. If I didn't do that, then it would start a new case. The other thing that I believe will happen is if you keep it with the underscore 0000100 is that it will then just overwrite everything we've already done. So let's test that theory. So I'm going to go here, we're going to click generate and let's look at this and see what happens. So we'll create a new settings file. And nope, it started a new one entirely. So that's not what we're looking for. But that will at least give you some certain ways to do it. So now you've kind of seen the basics of how we made that. Now let's dive a little bit into the keyframes with the angle and everything else. So I'm going to throw some examples on the screen here that I did previously, and you can see how the angle is going to affect it. Whether, you know, when I put it to 1, when I change this, when I change this. I'm going to have examples of all of those and what those are going to look like, so you can see how that movement works. And then when you get into 3D, I'm going to let this do its thing. Alright, we still have the 50 frames, whatever. This is going to change things a little bit. So now 2D is not really going to be affected by this. I'm going to turn this off at 0. So these are a little different because we still have our translation X and Y, but we have these rotation 3dx, 3dy, and then 3dz, which is like angle, and then translation C is like zoom. So 3dx is not intuitive to me. It's tilt the canvas up and down. So you're gonna like look up, I'm looking up or I'm looking down. That's how it's going to affect it. And then 3dy is if we're looking to the left or looking to the right, and how that's going to affect it. I'm also going to have other examples on the screen that's going to show what those look like, so you get an idea of how that will affect it, because until you kind of understand how that works, you don't really understand. And then what you can do is you can combine these, for example, or you can change the cadence. So I'm going to go back to 2D, and what you can do is say I want the canvas to move. Let's say I want it to move right for a certain number of pixels, and then, or rather frames, and then I want it to change to stop moving at 0, or at 50 frame I want it to stop moving. So what's going to happen here is it's going to start moving, and then it's going to slowly slow down till 0. Now if you don't want that, and you want it to be more abrupt, then you need to put it the previous frame as also 1, so then it will create an abrupt stop like this. And that's how you know that you're going to create that kind of effect. Now if you want to use these in tandem, you can, and I've done that in the video that you're going to see here, and it's a mix of where, okay, cool, I want at frame 50 or frame whatever I want, you know, I want it to be a gradual move. So then what I would do is at 1, or if I want a nice gradual stop instead of an abrupt one, you can do it that way. Or if you want to say, you can, well, if you want the gradual stop, you can do this. But what if I want that gradual stop to not be as, you know, as slow? So then what I would do is, instead of this being 0.1, or rather 1 to 0, is going to be like 0.3, and then 48 is going to be, you know, 0.7, and 47 is going to be 0.9. And that's going to give you a much more gradual stop quicker. And you can use this sort of thing to create S-curves or diagonals, so you can use X and Y together. So if I wanted X to start at 1 like this, and then Y would also be at 1, now instead of going just this way or this way, it's going to go this way. So you can really use that to create a lot of different things for you. Make sure that you have your commas out. I don't remember if they affect these or not, but let's play with the transform center X and transform center Y, because I don't know what those are going to do. So let's just do 1 for this, because I don't know. And we're just going to do, instead of all those keyframes, let's just do 50 keyframes. That's more than enough, I think, to test. And let's see what happens. Okay, so to use transform center X and transform center Y, basically what that's going to do is it's going to instead stay here, say like center is my face, I'm going to move it so the center's up here, or the center's over here, or over here, or over here. Whether it's for the X or for the Y, you can use them in tandem. So it's interesting. This is only used, however, with angle and zoom if you're using that and you want to shift the center. So what's cool is, so say I made a video 50 frames. Click here after the generation to show the video, so you can see the video right here. It gets wild. Here's the zoom. And it's showing stuff! That looks pretty wild to me. So, but you can see it's not going center to her chest. It's going center is off center here. So that's what those are going to do. And the angle one, if I can find it, it gets pretty wild here. So you can see how it changed the center angle for that. So that is what those do. And for just today's video, I think that's where we're going to end it. And yeah, that's it. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. I hope to be doing some more of these here soon as I continue to learn more, tips and tricks and techniques, and then I can share them with you guys. So thank you so much for watching and hope to see you again soon.